Just to provide a little background, Thursday, September 10th, the superintendent and executive director of Valley Unified and another superintendent from Madawaska, Giselle, came down and met with the commissioner to discuss a number of items. And I believe the draft letter includes that. I don't have it in front of me. I'd have to minimize my screen, but references that letter, but that meeting. In that meeting, they agreed that they should set a date for them to develop the kind of a rough framework that they could vote on with the three school districts could vote on, and that needed to be a firm stake in the ground to kind of make sure that that didn't get lost, and it happened this fall. So that date was discussed to be December 30th, I believe, 30th or 31st, 31st, or whatever the letter says. I'm looking, there's 31 days, whatever the draft letter says, in the meeting on September 10th. And the other major question they had was about the if a district drops out, could two go forward? So those were the two big questions. There was further discussion about the financing needed to help plan this project. But the two issues were the date and the setting the date for them to bring something forward, and the two districts not being able to continue. And just the only other information I have is the next day, Friday, September 11th, Ben emailed, Executive Director Ben Siwa emailed the commissioner and just asked her to confirm the date and that the two projects couldn't continue. And several days after that, there was different requests to reply just to confirm those two things. And ultimately, that was the response of this draft letter to confirm those two items. That was the information that I had when I drafted it. There is a third item, and that is financing. And my understanding is there's a response that will be developed from the department's finance team regarding the finance question. As I think they were working on that. I've spoken with those folks, and they were working on that, and they needed to get back to the commissioner, last I knew. But that was not part of the charge of this request, of the first two bullet items.
So does anybody on the committee or Wilson have any questions or comments?
I sent an email out this morning thanking you and Scott for your work on this letter. I think it's much more focused on where we need to go. I'd like to hear from some other folks. I do have one particular issue that I'd like to address, but I'd be happy to hear from other folks before I use the committee's time.
Well, I thought the committee made it clear at the last meeting that this is our purview, and we should have been involved with this from day one. And I personally feel that this committee has to make a recommendation to the full board, and the full board needs to weigh in on it on the 14th before anything goes out. That's my own personal opinion. I welcome the rest of the committees.
I would agree, and it's on the agenda for the 14th meeting, so I think that's how it would play out anyway. So I totally agree. Are we deciding today what we're going to recommend to the board, i.e., continuing the program with two schools, or what are we going to decide today?
We cannot continue the program with only two schools.
Well, that's what I thought, and I don't think we should. So
yeah. I do not believe we can, because it was advertised, and the other three entities that came forward did not go forward to the second phase because they didn't have the right number schools, etc. So we would have to start all over again, except we've got the third project that we've got to talk about that we did at the last meeting. So, Fern?
Yeah, I reviewed the letter. I'm looking at the timeline letter of September 30, 2020. So I'm assuming that's the most recent letter. Is that correct, Chair? Madam Chair?
There's one that's dated October 1st that Scott sent out. When did you send that, Scott? A day or two ago?
Yes, as requested, I made sure you had the most recent.
Because when I received your email, I looked and I saw timeline letter September 30. So I must have, I messed up, I guess.
Is the name of the file September 30 or the date on the letter?
The file is called timeline letter September 30, 2020.
Okay, well, I'm not, that could be the right letter. I apologize for any, that would have been when, the goal was to have the letter done by
Scott,
October 1st.
that's the title of the document that was in your October 7th
So I'll proceed.
communication, but it is a new version of the letter.
Yeah, it's October 1st, I believe, was on the date
Right.
in the letter.
Okay, well, let me make my comment, and if I've got the wrong one, I will pull it up because I've minimized Zoom. I'm looking at the letter right now, and I'll just pull up your most recent email. So, and I, with the question that Peter asked about, do we move forward? Can we move forward with two schools? And that is a definite. We know that the ranking would have been very different if it had been only two schools, and that's how we made a decision with the Holton-Hodgdon group as well. When they lost two of their other partners and they were left just the two of them, we decided that at that point it was a no-go for them, and we moved to Dexter and Greenville. And so this one has to continue with all three parties, or else they're out of the running. And the second paragraph, which states that the development of a governance structure that is legally capable of operating or constructing public schools is required in the project to move forward. Is that statement still in that October?
Yes.
Draft? Okay. So, that's very clear. They were going through the service center. They cannot go through a service center to have a new school built. So that's been made clear. So they know what they need to do. The next sentence, the boards of the 3 member SAUs must work together to develop and vote on a written plan to create the structure. So to me, that is clear again in that this is what you need to do. And we need to have a formal board vote from each of the individual 3 boards on the plan to create that structure. And the deadline is December 31st. So in my mind, this is clear. And I did read your email this morning, Chair Hess, about not being sure what the documentation of the plan is. And in my mind, I thought, well, geez, it's, the 3 boards need to have a plan to move forward in creating a structure that will allow them to build a high school collaboratively. So I'm very okay with the letter, but I am open to hearing what others have to say.
But you have one district that's pulling out, so.
And that's their decision, Peter. If that's the case, we didn't go get that information. They provided us that information, and so at this point, they're the ones that raised the flags and said, we're not really looking at. We got a problem with the interlocal agreement. We have a problem with the site, and I had questioned Martha before the last meeting. And do we get involved with local politics? They brought it to our attention. What they do at this point.
Yeah. So the written plan is only a written plan if all 3 are in it. Correct.
All 3 would have to be in it, and they have to have a plan that they will create this new governing structure.
Right. Okay.
So, December 31st, again, was a date they have mutually agreed to in that meeting. No one forced anybody's hands into this, and I fully respect what the commissioner did and would move forward with this letter as drafted right now. That would be my I would be ready to make a motion to do that, but I don't want to turn. I want to make sure that the other members have a chance to weigh in and see what their thoughts are.
Jane, we haven't heard from you. How about your thoughts?
Martha, that I wasn't totally clear. I think maybe one more sentence on the written plan to create this structure. One more sentence in that paragraph, because the way Fern verbalized it, I knew she knew what she expected, but I'm not sure I know what's expected. That the written plan must delineate a few things, and I just think what needs to be delineated might need to be added.
So, Scott, is that something we can add to the letter?
I mean, certainly you can, yes, and I would run it back by the commissioner. The only thing I would, what I tried to do was to draft a letter with what was said in the meeting. And in the meeting, there weren't any additional requirements. Now, we could add the requirements in the letter. If the commissioner agrees to those as well. It's a two, that would be, if you propose that, we could, you draft up the language of what kind of, I don't know if requirements that you would like. And I'm sure she would review it or consider it or sign it or whatever.
So could I enter the conversation at this point, Martha?
Yeah, certainly.
I guess my thinking is very similar to what Jane spoke about. This is a committee decision, but I just like us to be. I don't think Jane's suggesting that the committee wants to add anything. I think what she's suggesting is we just need to be crystal clear about what they need to do and what they need to submit. And if they if it indeed is that they need to have developed a written plan that each of the districts has school boards has voted on, and it's the school board votes that we're talking about here, I believe. Is that right, Scott?
Oh, yes. Yes.
Not a referendum, but the school board.
Yeah, they're all going to need to vote. They're all going to need to vote on this.
Right. I want to be sure there's real specificity about indefinite antecedents here. The they is the three school boards. Okay, and that they need to vote on a written plan that they have developed. And the deadline is not for them to submit the plan, but it's to submit a plan that they've all approved. Is that correct?
Yes.
I think we need that level of clarity, at least for some of our understanding. So I'll just give that piece. In the logic train that Fern referred to in a note that I sent out this morning, in my mind, that all relates to the December 31st deadline. And the question that I would ask the committee to entertain as they're looking at this issue is it a reasonable timeline for them to get this letter on the 15th of October, asking them to develop a plan and have each of the school boards vote on it and submit it to the department or the department and the board, whomever, by December 31st. I would just ask that you consider, if indeed that's what we're looking at, developing a plan, having each school board vote in the affirmative, and then and submit the plan and the attestation that it's been approved by all school boards by December 31st, if that's enough time. And that's all I want to see you folks wrestle with.
I guess what I'm missing is you have one district who said they're not going to be part of it.
They have not yet dropped out, to my knowledge. Have they actually dropped out of the process?
Okay, so they said on August 26th, we're initiating steps to withdraw.
They're initiating steps. That's how I parse the language. What's your understanding, Scott? And what's the commissioner's understanding of that?
Yes, that we were hopeful that the I can't remember the terminology that we used, but it was not It was not.
That was the language that Ben Sirwa used in a subsequent letter, that this is not a done deal. I think that's exactly the phrase that he used.
And what they wanted on September 10th was they wanted a direction, and they set the direction as by the end of the year, and they would have a framework that all three boards could vote on, and that he had evidence that if one backed out, it would not continue.
So, Jane?
What I'm kind of not necessarily changing the letter, but so this committee, the board, Pender, Scott, know what should be there. So if they get the letter and say, what do we need in the letter? There can be a unified answer. And just for clarity, and I think the letter needs to go out as is as soon as possible. But I think Scott, Pender, us, before hopefully the meeting next week, that in the report to us that we want that all three boards have had a vote that says we're going. I think first thing is they all say we're going to continue with the project as a threesome. I think that's essential. And then that we're constructing a legal entity in order to make it. Those are two things that I think ought to be in the letter to us by December 31st.
So I guess I heard Wilson say timeline. If they all have to vote on a plan, is that enough time? Or should we be saying they have to have the plan and a commitment that they're going forward, and then they can vote on the plan in January or February or whatever? That's an issue. I think we're all in agreement. If somebody drops out, they're gone. And all that money that we invested in Valley Unified is gone. But the other question I have is, what is the role of the CTE and higher ed in this? Are they part of the structure? Are they part of the new SAU, so to speak? Or, what is their role?
I think that's a great question, Martha, because it is built into the integrated consolidated requirements that there has to be a higher ed and a CTE component to that unit. Would that need to be affirmed in their plan, Scott? Would that be your understanding?
That was not part of what Ben and the commissioner talked about. The CTE and is a center, which means it's part of, and Fern's better than if I misstep here, MSAD 33. That's already, by MSAD 33 being in the project, that includes the CTE, because they're the board that oversees that. Any higher education components would be I think, secondary to the fact that the three districts need to figure out if one's out and one's in, and vote on the fact that they're going to move forward with the framework. Otherwise, the money needs to go to another candidate.
So you're saying that the higher ed component could be ratified or affirmed at a subsequent date?
Oh, no, I think no question. That component hasn't even been really defined of what level it would be, but without the three districts, which includes the CTE, the project can't move forward. And with two, it can't move forward, and with three, it won't move forward if they don't come forward with a plan by the day that they agreed in the meeting.
Well, I would be happy if they decided by the 31st that they're actually going to have a plan. I mean, if they can't agree that they're going to be part of this thing, then I don't care what the plan reads, because it isn't going to happen. So, and I don't want to push it. I don't want to kick this thing down the thing another few months either. So, as far as I'm concerned, the bigger question is: are three in it or three not in it? And if the three are in it, then they can do the plan. But if
So, Peter, does that mean that we need all three boards to have voted before December 31st?
it sounds like it, but it also sounds like if the one who's going to pull out needs to decide how they. It sounds like to me they're either in or they're out. So it sounds to me like one district has to decide if they're in or they're out, and if they can't decide, then they're out. I don't see kicking this down a bunch of months and having them go through all this haggling. Either that district who said they intend to pull out decides that they're in, or they decide they're out by the 31st. Then they can make a plan. That's my opinion.
Yes, Fern?
You know, the CT, coming back to the CTE and higher ed, that is not an issue at all. And Scott, you're absolutely right. The CTE, the center, is built in SAD 33. Actually, the board owns the CTE center. It has a big say, but we have Madawaska and Fort Kent on its board, and we've always worked very well cooperatively. There is no issue with the CTE, never has been, and the cooperative agreement is very clear. And the higher ed, they were part of the project because you needed to involve higher ed, and so they're not the ones putting on the brakes or with any issue. So Peter's exactly right when he says it's about, you know, do we have 3 SAUs wanting to do this or we don't? Is it only 2? And it's because SAD 27 sent us that correspondence, which we did not go looking for, but they sent us the correspondence. And so that's the issue. And again, the letter to me is very clear. They must work together to develop and vote on a written plan to create this structure. So they must vote. So we need to have evidence of that vote taking place, and that they would document that and send us that. They've known since September 10. So the question of, is this a sufficient timeline? I hate to repeat myself, but again, this is a date that they chose, and they walked out of that meeting agreeing to December 31st. And I don't see it as why I should say that's not enough time. You need more time. I'm not even working with them on developing this thing. So I fully respect what was done in this meeting, the follow-up to the meeting. And again, I support where Scott and the commissioner are heading with the draft of their letter.
Jane, you had your hand up.
I would say let's send the letter or get it to the board next week and send the letter. And if Scott can be clear and what do you really mean, and the commissioner, then I'd like to have the vote done by December 31st from 3 of them.
Should the letter also be sent to the superintendents of all 3 SAUs or the chairs of the committees, or?
Martha, because they formed an RSU, there is only one superintendent, and that is Ben Sirwa.
Okay.
Is the assistant superintendent for all 3 SAUs.
Okay.
So if you want to send it to anyone in addition to the superintendent, you could include the board chairs of the 3 boards.
Just copy them.
Yeah, just CC
Right.
them. I don't think it goes necessarily to them, but we might want to CC them.
Good
Yes.
idea.
Yes,
Okay, Peter, you agree with
Yes.
getting the letter out, or recommending to the board next Wednesday that we get the letter out as quickly as possible, perhaps being more clear about what they actually have to do, as opposed to develop and vote on. We could perhaps, each of the SAUs must vote on the plan that is developed, or something along those lines. Wilson, I think that's what you were suggesting in your email, correct?
Yes.
Do you have any wording? Do you have a sentence that you'd like for us to consider? And is there any clarification that you can see to the particular sentence that's there, or an additional sentence that you want us to consider, Wilson? Because I'm open to hearing anything that you would have drafted.
Quite frankly, I didn't think it was. Well, I'll say it this way: I thought it would have been presumptuous of me to present new language.
Okay.
I certainly could work with Martha and Scott, but I think Martha and Scott can work out language that has
I
specificity
think it
that
can be as simple
they
as,
like.
develop a written plan to create this structure. All 3 boards must have voted in the affirmative on this plan. Something like that. I don't think it has to be particularly cumbersome.
It would be really helpful to me if you, because I am on vacation today, and as soon as this meeting's over, I'm walking out the door, and I won't be back at my home until probably the 13th, or available until the 13th, which is the day before your board meeting. So any assistance, or if you want to generate language, it would be very helpful if you could come up with a sentence, or if that's the sentence, we could even, because I would assume you're going to need some kind of document to take to the board on the 14th that Mary will need to distribute. So if we could,
I'm willing to crawl out on a limb and edit on the fly and give just a really short attempt to patch it.
yeah,
And that would be to go to the last sentence in the second paragraph, and say the deadline for submitting documentation of a plan and evidence that all 3 school boards or boards have voted in the affirmative to adopt the plan is due to the department on December 31st, 2020.
Sounds good.
I think so too.
has someone got that?
I did. I'll get it to Mary.
Mary has the recorder on.
Oh, good. That's even better.
Okay. I think that's
Does
the
everybody agree with that on the committee?
yes.
That's what we will present to the board, and Mary will get it out by email ahead of time so people can see it. But we would be recommending that the board vote to send that letter. Is that correct?
Yes.
And it would also be CC'd to the board chairs of all 3 SAUs. Correct? Anybody opposed to that?
I'm not opposed. You said you had the wording, Martha. Can you read it again?
The deadline for submitting the documentation of the plan and evidence that all boards have voted in the affirmative is due,
To adopt the plan.
what?
To adopt the plan.
Oh, to adopt the plan. Oh, I missed something. Good thing,
Good thing Wilson's here.
is due to the department on or before December 31st, 2020?
Works for me.
Good job, Martha. Yep.
Brilliant.
Well, it's not me, it's
Well,
Wilson.
but you're faster than I am because you had it you had it in record. Yes, Wilson, that is well done. Well phrased.
Martha, I had a grammar question in the first paragraph. It's the second sentence. In that meeting, should there be a comma after meeting?
Probably should.
Okay.
We can have fun with grammar, but the school of thought that I come from says that prepositional phrases are not followed by a comma. But
Okay. Thank you.
however you folks like it.
So we won't do that?
But
We won't do that.
I don't care. I really don't care.
The less Mary has to do, the better, right, Mary?
Yep.